How deep we fish all depends on the time of year, so we'll fish anywhere from 30 fathom out to 100 fathom. And it seems to be the case no matter where we are. At different times of year throughout the year, there always seems to be plenty of eggers and plenty of shorts, regardless of the depth.
I started in 1991 in a 25-foot boat with a gas engine, 400 wooden traps. Fast forward to 2024, I've got a 42-foot boat, 5-foot traps, 800 of them. I've gotten to the point in the last 5 years, my traps have 6 vents. And the reason they have 6 vents is because I started with 2, then I went to 3, but they're filling so full of the juvenile lobsters in the last few years, you keep putting more vents in. You know, I fish usually no less than like 50 fathom. I'm shocked by the amount of little lobsters that even make it to the surface.
I don't fish outside anymore, I fish just inshore, inside of 3. In the last 2 years, I've seen more juvenile lobsters. I've seen so many small lobsters, that like 2 inches long or smaller, that we have to be careful because we step on them. We can't see them on the floor because they're in the kelp or the seaweed.
I had a lobster on my rail the other day that was that big. Come up in a lobster trap. I mean, a lot of the lobsters have settled offshore. When I first went out there years ago, we never caught the smaller lobsters. We're catching those now.
You know, out of 50, 60 fathom water, they're falling on the deck, they're falling on the floor. I say to my guys, watch it. Watch when you open that door, there's little ones sticking up through the gauges. I've never seen so many juvenile small lobsters, especially offshore, little lobsters. So when you get hit with picking the paper up someday and grabbing your coffee and it says, there's not enough juvenile lobsters, we need to change the measure and the vent, it's like, what? Like, wow.
Well, the measure increase, I just don't see where it's time for it yet.
This one kind of took me by surprise when I heard it come about. So we've seen no shortage of egg-bearing lobsters or short lobsters. It seems like there's an overabundance of them actually. In the amount of time that I've been fishing, I haven't noticed any kind of pattern that would indicate a decline.
I remember when I read that there was a trigger that was going to be potentially met. It scared me when I saw that it's a 3-stage increase with the 2 gauge increases as well as a vent increase.
The approach to this gauge increase is, well, maybe it's going to help the industry rebound. We don't want a collapse of the lobster industry like they had in the southern states. But I think that's being dangled over our heads, and nobody wants that. But if you're going to make a regulation, it's got to make sense. And this makes 0 sense.
Last year in September, we caught so many short lobsters for weeks and weeks and weeks that I thought there was no way that we were going to meet it this year. And then when it was met, I was blown away like everybody else that I was fishing around, because we were all saying the same thing, that September was almost a wash because the days we could fish where there weren't storms, we'd go out and we'd haul and it would just be full of shorts.
It was as crazy a thing as we've ever heard. If you had asked me, this regulation hadn't come along, if no one had mentioned it, and you would have said to me, what do you see right now that maybe is different than in the past? I would say, wow, in my area, I see all kinds of juvenile lobsters. I see so many egged lobsters, more egged lobsters than I've ever seen.
We're seeing there's more small lobsters. You know, we're seeing them from deep water to shallow water, they're everywhere, and plenty of egg lobsters. I'd like to see that they see the same information we're seeing. And so maybe, you know, reevaluate and get data that paints a more accurate picture of what we see. You know, and yes, maybe some places they go, there aren't any there, but different years, different places, more lobsters than others. They do have legs, they can move, you know, they can swim, they can, you know, they'll go where they want to be.
These lobsters move so fast and are so migratory that it's really hard to collect accurate data on them. When you don't look at how the data was collected and you've never been on a fishing boat and you just assume that we're probably taking too many lobsters, which I think is a super reasonable assumption if that's the window that you're looking at it through. But from my experience, which started when I was a boy in this fishery, there's more lobsters on the bottom now than there were when I was a kid. We've been farming them and we've been feeding them and then managing their population through throwing back the breeders and then throwing back the shorts. I watched our landings come up and then peak, and I think it was because technology of harvesting them went up, And then once we got to the point where we'd harvested so many of them, then it started to plateau and come back down, but we're still in a very manageable level for the size of this fishery. And there's no indices that I see in the data that I collect daily from each and every one of these traps that would show that this population's in decline.
If you're going to make me have a different measure and you're going to regulate me, you have to at least have some data where I am to tell me that there's an issue, because I'm not seeing it. People around me aren't seeing it, you know? We always have to have that open mind. But to say, as a regulation and the whole entire state of Maine needs to up this gauge, it's mind-blowing.
And don't get me wrong, if there's actually an issue and there actually is a shortage of these smaller lobsters, I think that we should definitely get ahead of it and try to find solutions. But I just think that we need to take a little bit more time here and make sure that there is actually an issue. Maybe expand the studies and expand the ways that we conduct these studies to make sure that there actually is an issue. Because what we're seeing isn't really lining up with there being an issue.
I don't agree with the gauge increase because it does nothing. It does nothing but steal more market share from us to give to Canada, to give to other places. And the excuse we're using right now is that if we don't do something, there's not going to be something here for our kids. Well, if you're going to do something, make sure it's the right thing. This isn't the right thing to do. Gauge increase, not going to do nothing to help anybody except put more of these fellas right out here, right out of business.
When we got the reprieve of the whales, you had a second, just a second to take a breath. And just about the time you get that, this measure thing comes along. And I feel like it's the same way. Maybe we need it, maybe we do. But can we please have some time to collect the data that says we need it? Because the data that you're looking at, if this was a big pie in general of what we're talking about, you've taken a little slither out of the corner with your fork and said, oh, that recipe's not right, we gotta change, you know what I mean? And it's like, this is a big picture. This is what we're all doing. And the way that you're getting the data is nothing like what we're doing. I think like anything in life, there's gotta be that common ground where you can just say, hey, here's what you're saying, here's what we're saying. Let's come up with a way that you'll agree with, that we'll agree with, whether we want us to bring someone on the boats with us, whatever you want us to do, but please give us more time to prove to you that we don't need this. If we don't, then okay, we gotta go through with it. But if you just give us some time, we can prove this, you know?
So with issues like these arising, it's great to see these associations and organizations working together to just address the concerns and make sure that the data is sound. I think we just need to make sure that there's a need before we start changing stuff.
There's a balance.
But at the moment it's not broken. We don't need to fix it.
Right.